Welcome back, everybody, to another reaction video. Well, it's been a while since we've checked in on our friend Mr. Beat, and he's got a new video that came out about a week ago about his favorite topic to cover, which is U.S. presidents. One of our favorites as well. Presidential videos always seem to do really well here on Vlogging Through History. So the most surprising presidential firsts is this latest video. Many of you know, if you're been around the channel for a while, that Matt's a friend of mine, so I always encourage people to check his channel out. He's got a lot of great content, does a great job with it, so the link is down in the description. I will also post in the comment section below, in a pinned comment, my playlist of every video I have done taking a look at Mr. Beat's content. With that in mind, let's dive into this one.
Who's first? Who's on first? Oh, good job writing the first comment underneath this video. You know who I'm talking about. But yeah, I'm Mr. Beat, and I've never been first place at anything. Aww. Although, as far as I'm aware, I think I am the first person to ever live stream myself calling every senator in the country.
Yeah, that actually was really cool when he did that, and now he's currently doing this thing where he's really advocating for uncapping Congress. It's something that he and I have talked about, and I think we both agree strongly on, which is that 435 representatives for the United States Congress is far too few given the population that we have today. It's like 1 million people are represented by each member of Congress, and we've been stuck on that number for a while. So not to dive too much into politics, but I agree with him on that.
So there's that. But this video is not about senators. This video is about presidents, American presidents. Every president probably was the first to do and be something.
That's true.
But in this video, let's look at the more interesting and historically significant stuff.
That's actually a really interesting point he makes. Every president was probably first at something. And if you're a sports fan like I am, you've probably seen those really niche statistics that you're like, well, yeah, I guess, you'll see a post where it says, first guy to ever have 27 points, 11 rebounds, and 14 assists in one game. Like these really random numbers. You can always make an argument that somebody's the first to do something. Like, I'm probably the first guy named Chris in Mahoning County, Ohio, to have 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. That might be true, but it's a really weird thing to say.
And if they were the first and only to do something or be something, well, I left that out. In fact, that might just be a future video. Let's start with the ultimate first. George Washington, the first president of the United States, obviously. And being the first president, he was unavoidably the first president to do a bunch of stuff. I mean, we could get pretty boring here if you wanted to start talking about routines and everyday activities. For example, I'm almost certain that George Washington was the first president to ever pick his nose and fart. Nah, Joseph, let's focus on the big stuff. Washington was the first to go uncontested in an election, the first to be inaugurated twice, the first to serve a full term, well, 2 full terms, and the first to voluntarily step down after 2 terms, setting a precedent that lasted until Franklin Roosevelt messed it up. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do not give enough, well, I shouldn't say we don't give enough credit, because a lot of people do give credit to George Washington being first and how many precedents that he set as president, and how important it was that we had someone with the character that George Washington, I'm not saying he was perfect, I'm saying his character in terms of how he saw leadership was vital in setting a tone for the presidency, and he should get all the credit in the world for that. And that's why he's consistently rated one of our greatest presidents, because of, think about some of the presidents we've had, past and present, and had they been the first in that job, how they might have defined the role differently for everyone who came after them.
Washington was the first to issue a veto, an executive order, a pardon. He was the first to sign a bill into law, yada yada. I shouldn't have to go into all that.
And you know this, man!
John Adams, the first vice president. He was also the first vice president to become president. He was the first president with a vice president from an opposing political party, and the first.
Yeah, which doesn't happen really anymore because of the change in the law. But that's a great point. there have actually been relatively few vice presidents who have become president by getting elected. We've had a bunch of vice presidents become president because the president died in office or resigned, but very few like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson or someone like Joe Biden, who actually wasn't the sitting vice president when he became president. You know, there was a break in there, but still relatively few. George H.W. Bush is another one.
First president to live in the White House. He and his wife, Abigail, apparently moved in even though it was still under construction at the time. Adams was the first president with biological children.
Yeah, as far as we know, you know, there's some speculation about George Washington possibly fathering a child with an enslaved person. I think his name was West Ford was the name of the child, and he was said to look like Washington, but there's no evidence of that, really. And yeah, we've had a bunch of presidents who haven't had biological children.
He was the first president to have never served in the military and to not veto any bills. Oh, and I know this is still a sore spot for John Adams, but he is also the first president to lose re-election. Yep. He lost to his vice president, Thomas Jefferson. Well, Jefferson was the first president to have previously been a governor. There'd be 16 presidents after him who were also governors. He was also the first Secretary of State to become president. 5 presidents after him were...
Yeah, and look at this, because early on, Secretary of State was, and this shows the importance of the role of Secretary of State. The cabinet was much, much more influential in the 19th century presidencies than it is today. They were seen as really the most powerful people in the country after the president and had a great deal of influence. So look, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, John Quincy Adams, Martin Van Buren, and James Buchanan, all secretaries of state who became president.
Also in that position, he was the first president inaugurated in Washington, D.C., and the first to have an inaugural parade. And with the Louisiana Purchase, he was the first president to expand the country's borders. James Madison, the first president to ask Congress to declare war on another country.
Yep.
Congress said yes, by the way. That was the War of 1812. And thus, Madison was also the first president during wartime. He was the first president to have his vice president die in office. George Clinton.
Not that guy.
Not that George Clinton. I'm really getting tired of this, okay? And finally, Madison was the first of 19 presidents to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Including one who served in the House after he was president, John Quincy Adams.
James Monroe, the first president to serve as a U.S. Senator. There'd be 16 presidents after him.
That said, while it's true that we had this many presidents serve as U.S. senators, only a couple of them have been elected to the presidency as a sitting senator. So James Garfield's a weird anomaly in there because he was a senator-elect when he got elected president, but never served in the Senate. But I'm just looking over this list, and let's see, we've got, I think William Henry Harrison was probably a sitting Ohio senator when he was elected to the presidency. Benjamin Harrison, no, I think he, let me look at this. Okay, so let me back off of that a little bit. We've had 3 sitting U.S. senators become president. We're talking about Warren Harding, John F. Kennedy, and Barack Obama, and that's it. All these other guys were either out of office as a senator or in some other office when they became president.
Who were also U.S. senators at some point. He was also the first president to ride on a steamboat. And he was the first president to have one of his kids married at the White House. John Quincy Adams, the first president elected despite receiving fewer than a majority of electoral votes and fewer votes than one of his opponents. Snappity snap. Adams was the first of 2 presidents to have a dad who was also the president.
Yeah, so the way our system works, for those who might not be familiar with it, you have to have a majority of the electoral votes, not just the most, not just a plurality of electoral votes. You have to have one more than half. And if nobody gets one more than half, then it goes to the House of Representatives. And it works kind of weird. It's not every representative gets one vote. Each state gets one vote. So, for example, if it happened today, Ohio has, 15 representatives, 10 Republicans, 5 Democrats. So in Ohio, those 15 would all vote for who they want to win in the case of a deadlocked election. And in that case, it would be the Republican that would win because you have 10 Republicans and 5 Democrats. And the one vote from Ohio would go to the people that were voted for. And so you'd have to have 26 of the 50 states in order to win in that case.
He was also the first president to be photographed, although this photograph of him that you're looking at right now was taken several years after he left office.
So the first president to be photographed in terms of the order of when they became president, not when the photograph was taken. I think the first president to be photographed while in office is probably going to be, it might be Zachary Taylor. No, it's probably Polk. He was
the first to have shorter hair and facial hair. And finally, Adams was the first president to not be a founding father. Andrew Jackson. I'll start with one you have probably heard before. Jackson was the first president born in a log cabin. Believe it or not, 7 American presidents were born in log cabins.
Hey, and Matt and I went to the site of the log cabin where James Garfield was born. The original cabin's gone now, but they have a rebuilt one on the site.
Jackson was the first to face assassination attempts. He was also the first to ride a train. Come on, ride a train and ride it. And although the evidence is shaky, Jackson apparently was the first president to have a tattoo.
Nice.
Say, do you want to see my tattoo? Martin Van Buren.
Matt's getting a little more edgy with his jokes, and I'm here for it. I like it.
First president born after the United States became a country. After he left office, he'd be the first president to run for a second non-consecutive term.
Interesting quirk of the Constitution. When the Constitution was passed, obviously the Constitution has in it a provision that you have to be a natural-born citizen of the United States to be elected president, among some other qualifications, including age and residency requirements. So natural-born, there was all this stuff about what they call birthers when Barack Obama was running for president and after he was elected, saying that, he wasn't born in the United States. Well, first of all, he was. But second of all, it doesn't matter because he was born an American citizen. His mother was an American citizen. So it didn't matter. He could have been born on the moon. He was still born an American citizen. He was a natural-born citizen. But any of these people who were born before the United States existed as a country, or that were living in the United States, even if they were born somewhere else, like Alexander Hamilton, for example, were still eligible for president because when the Constitution was adopted, it had a grandfather clause in it. So anybody who was a citizen, who was living in the country at the time, was grandfathered in and could still run.
That was with the Free Soil Party, making him also the first president to run for president with a third party, William Henry Harrison. The first president to die while in office. And sadly, that's all he's often known for.
Yeah.
But hey, he was also the first president to serve less than one full term in office. So wait, he was also the first president to have a photograph taken of him while in office.
Oh, okay. So it was Harrison. 9th president. Okay. While in office. Although, I look at that picture and I'm a little torn about whether it's actually a photograph of him. Because sometimes we have these photographs that are actually photographs of lifelike paintings or drawings that are done, and that really looks like one to me. So I'm a little curious about that particular photograph. Okay, so it's a bit of a gray area with this one because William Henry Harrison apparently was photographed while in office, but the photograph has been lost. And what we're looking at here is indeed a daguerreotype photograph of a painting of Harrison. So it's it's a gray area. I mean, it's technically true. He was the first sitting president photographed in office. We just don't have the photo.
No, that's not it. That's
Oh.
a photo of a painting of him taken
Okay.
9 years after he died.
There you
the
go.
photo of him is actually lost, and I still haven't found it.
This is why I should wait and let him finish before I jump in with my information, because he said it.
Hey, did you know that I get death threats? True story. I guess it's because I have opinions sometimes that some people disagree with. Anyway, due to this, in recent years, I've really stepped up my personal privacy efforts online. Gotta make sure the unstable folks can't look up my personal information. Stuff.
This is actually sad but true. I've been pretty fortunate. Of course, I have, first of all, I have less than half the following that Matt does, but second of all, I'm not nearly as outspoken about controversial things as he is, and I give him credit for that. But keep that in mind with people in general when it comes to public people, whether it's YouTubers or anybody else, is that we're people with families, and whatever you think of someone's opinions, it's not worth getting angry about to the point of wanting to threaten them or hurt them. It's just sad but true.
John Tyler, the first president to just become president despite not being elected president. After William Henry Harrison died, there was actually a bit of a crisis.
Yeah.
Since the Constitution didn't explicitly say who takes over as president if a president dies in office. Well, Tyler, being the vice president, took it upon himself to just take over. Tyler was also the first president to lose his wife while in office.
So, yeah, we take for granted that it was just, the vice president becomes president because it's happened so many times now. But remember, until something happens for the first time, people don't really know how it goes. And, like a lot of things, the Constitution is open to interpretation on some of this. And so there was debate. Does he just become the acting president? Do we have an election to replace him in the middle of the term? How does this go? So, and, obviously there were people who saw him as illegitimate after that. So all of these things had to be worked out. And like in George Washington's presidency, when he really set the standard, this stuff was cleared up pretty well. Now, what wasn't cleared up is who would have become president after that, because until late in the 20th century, we didn't have a mechanism for replacing a vacant vice presidency. That only came about with a constitutional amendment, which then immediately was used to make Gerald Ford the new vice president when Spiro Agnew resigned. But so there was no vice president for the rest of his term. There was no vice president for the rest of when Andrew Johnson became president or when Millard Fillmore became president. And so the next in line constitutionally was the president pro tempore of the Senate. And that, many people argue, would have been a temporary solution, an acting president, until there could have been a special election. But again, had it actually happened, and it never did, maybe they just would have become president, and we wouldn't even be talking about it.
And then remarry
Julia
while
Gardner.
in office.
Yep.
James Polk, the first president to be under the age of 50 upon entering office. He was the first president to not seek re-election. True to his promise, he left office after his one term ended and then promptly died.
Yeah.
Zach-
I mean, we've talked about this before, but in the late 1840s through the 1860s, you see some serious premature deaths among people who served in Washington. Even at the presidency, and their families and Senate and members of the cabinet. There was something in the water. There's a lot of that going on. And Polk is, I think, one of the victims of that. He goes home and dies almost immediately after leaving office. Zachary Taylor dies in office. William Henry Harrison died in office. Look at how much of that happened in a short time.
Zachary Taylor, the first president who had never been elected to any office before becoming president. Not even class president. For reals. But here's a more
War hero.
obscure fact. Taylor was the first president to be in office when his own political party, the Whig Party, didn't have a majority in either house of Congress.
So speaking of Zachary Taylor, if you do a little Google search, if you're so inclined to see things, you can see his skull. Those of us who are old enough to remember might remember that he was exhumed a while back from his tomb in Kentucky. and they were doing tests to see whether or not he had been poisoned, and that was why he died in office. Turned out he wasn't, but there are some photos floating around of his remains.
Millard Fillmore,
Alec
the
Baldwin.
first president to establish a permanent White House library. That's about it. Oh, he apparently was also the first president to install a kitchen stove in the White House.
Interesting.
So there's that. Franklin Pierce. All right, so if we're going to keep this theme going, he was the first president to have central heating installed at the White House and bring a Christmas tree into the White House.
So you might ask, well, how'd they heat the White House before that? Well, they had fireplaces in all the rooms. You go into old houses from that time, you'll see like pretty much every room had its own fireplace.
Pierce was also the first president to have multiple vetoes overridden by Congress. You thought I was going to say multiple wives. No, multiple vetoes overridden by Congress. What kind of channel do you think this is?
So he's one of those folks who was a Northerner who kind of sided with the South when it came to the slavery issue, which is one of the dominant issues at that time. And so I can see how he would face a lot of opposition even within his own party.
James Buchanan. The first president to serve in the military but not become an officer in the military.
First unmarried president?
Yeah. That's all I got about Buchanan.
First unmarried president? How'd you, Matt? Maybe he's just going for like surprising, like lesser known things. But yeah, James Buchanan. Only president we've ever had that was never married.
Abraham Lincoln. The first president assassinated.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Did you hear about that? After this, he was the first president to lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda. Lying in state, by the way, just means the body of a dead, distinguished person is placed in a state building so that the public can pay their respects. But also...
There's a little more to it than that. I'm sure he knows this, but because you can also lie in honor in a public building like that. I don't know the exact differences, but there is a difference between lying in state and lying in honor.
Lincoln was...
And I think it has to do with, and maybe he said this, maybe I just didn't listen to it clearly, it has to do with whether or not you were like a government official or something. Because I think, for example, Rosa Parks, she was able to lie in honor, but because she wasn't a government official.
The first president born outside of the original 13 colonies, the first to have pet cats, and the first with a full beard.
Yeah.
Andrew Johnson. The first president impeached. He escaped conviction by just one vote. Serious stuff. But here's a more lighthearted one. Johnson was also the first president to welcome an organized baseball team to the White House. Ulysses Grant. The first president to create a national park. That would be Yellowstone National Park, which still exists today. Heck yeah. Grant was also the first president to host a Native American chief at the White House, and the first to host an official White House state dinner.
And the first president born in Ohio. These are important things.
Leaving office, he was the first president to publish his memoirs.
Listen, phenomenal. I mean, if you have any interest in the American presidency or the American Civil War, you've got to read Grant's memoirs, and also read Grant by Ron Chernow. Both phenomenal. But Grant, his memoirs are such an easy read. You know, some people write memoirs and they're trying to impress you, beat you over the head with how smart they are. That's kind of what Sherman did with his memoirs. But Grant's is such an easy read, and it's not because he's unintelligent. It's just because he was a very good storyteller.
Rutherford Hayes.
Yep.
Hello? Oh, yeah? Hayes was the first president to have a telephone installed at the White House? Thank you. Bye.
Which makes sense. The telephone was invented while he was president, or right before he became president.
He was also the first to hold the White House Easter egg roll and serve Thanksgiving dinner at the White House. And believe it or not, Hayes was the first president to visit the West Coast of the United States while in office. James Garfield. The first president to die before the age of 50. Garfield was also the first president to...
Hey, I was there when he shot that video. Nice. We have a picture of us sitting on that porch. Great visit, man. If you're ever in northeastern Ohio, go up to Menor, Ohio, which is northeast of Cleveland. check out the Garfield house. Really, really neat.
Deliver a campaign speech in a language other than English. That was a speech he gave completely in German to around 5,000 people on October 16th, 1880.
That actually makes a lot of sense, especially like for a president from Ohio, because Ohio had a lot of German immigrants. And Germans, up to at least probably fairly recently, maybe still to this day, make up the single largest identity. Like when you look in the census records and you look at times where they asked people, like, what's your background? German Americans were consistently the highest rated group. And part of that is because the people who had English descent, for example, or Scots-Irish descent, or Scottish or Irish, or any of the others, their ancestors had come so long before that those people by, say, 1880 identified just as Americans, not as English Americans or Irish Americans. But German Americans were a much more recent thing.
Chester Arthur, first president to weigh over 200 pounds.
I don't know if that's true. I feel like Garfield was over 200 pounds. I'm going to look this up. Yeah, so there might have been others. I don't know about previous presidents, but the only reason I know this is because I did so much study into Garfield when Death by Lightning came out. Yeah, Garfield was he was like 210, 215 when he was assassinated, or when he was shot, and he had dropped all the way to like 130 pounds by the time he died.
Well, that can't be the only first we have for Chester. Oh, he was also the first president to have an elevator installed at the White House.
Nice.
Those two things might be related. Grover Cleveland, the first president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms.
Not the only one?
Yeah, you know who the other one is. Cleveland was...
I love how he only showed Trump's hair and didn't mention him by name.
First president to be filmed in a short motion picture.
Really?
In 1895, Alexander Black filmed Cleveland as he signed a bill into law. I couldn't find the footage, though. Benjamin Harrison.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
The first president to wear a modern necktie. Yeah, like this one. I hate neckties so much. Anyway, Harrison was also the first president to install electric lighting,
which you wouldn't touch,
in the White House. William...
Yeah, so Harrison, I mean, this was a new thing, right? Electric lights with light switches. And he was so kind of terrified by being electrocuted, because there was still a debate going on about electricity. And, Thomas Edison didn't do any favors by, saying that electricity was dangerous. Certain kinds of electricity could kill you unless you used his kind of electricity. But so Harrison was afraid to touch the switches for fear of being electrocuted.
McKinley, the first president to ride in an automobile. A car. That's a car for you youngins out there. And apparently McKinley was the first president to own a bike. Theodore Roosevelt, the first sitting president to travel outside of the country.
Nice.
I'm not kidding. It took that long. Roosevelt was also the first president to ride in a submarine.
Oh, wow.
The first to fly in an airplane. He was the first president to call the White House
the White House.
The White House. Roosevelt was the first
it was the executive mansion, usually before that.
President to get work done in the West Wing, a separate building he had built just next to the White House.
Yeah, we talk about the Oval Office, but that's a relatively new thing, right? The Oval Office is in the West Wing. It's not in the main building of the what was then the executive mansion. So Roosevelt, first person to be in the Oval Office.
West of the White House, as a matter of fact.
West Wing.
He was the first to issue more
Great
than
show.
1,000 executive orders. And finally, Teddy was not only the first president, but first American to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
And incidentally, the only person to have both a Medal of Honor for heroism in wartime and also a Nobel Peace Prize. And the Peace Prize was for his work in helping bring a settlement for the Russo-Japanese War.
William Howard Taft. Taft was the first of 2 presidents buried at Arlington Cemetery, the other being John F. Kennedy. The first president to throw out a ceremonial first pitch at a baseball game. Taft went to multiple Major League Baseball games while in office. He was the first to play golf while in office. Yeah, there he is.
Nice.
Taft
I mean, and even if you listen to audio recordings of the early presidents that we have recordings for, he's the first one that sounds like us, right? You know, the other ones have a very different way of speaking because there was a particular style of speech that people gave, but he sounds like a regular dude. So in a lot of ways, Taft is this kind of first modern president.
Was also the first president to work in the Oval Office, a literally circle room in the aforementioned West Wing.
Okay, so I guess they hadn't built it yet when Roosevelt was in the West Wing.
Woodrow Wilson, the first president to hold regular press conferences. Wilson was the first sitting president to travel to Europe.
Yep.
And
Versailles.
He was the first president to declare a national emergency. He did this on February 5th, 1917, in response to what was going on at sea due to World War I. Warren Harding, the first president ever heard on the radio. He was the first president to learn how to drive a car. And apparently, he was the first president to use the term founding fathers, which is pretty crazy.
Wow, I didn't know that. And as we mentioned earlier, he would have been the first sitting U.S. senator to be elected president.
Calvin Coolidge, the first president to ever give a radio address from the White House. And the first to be sworn into office by another president.
Taft.
Herbert Hoover.
Yeah, so William Howard Taft was Chief Justice at that point.
The first president born west of the Mississippi River. Hello? What's that? Oh, yeah? He was also the first president to have a telephone on his desk? Huh. Well, how about that?
First president to never hold an elective office and not be a general.
Yeah, I know this phone isn't hooked up to anything. It's a gag. A lame gag. Franklin Roosevelt. Oh, I got a lot of ones for FDR, understandably. He was the first president to appear on television, the first sitting president to fly on an airplane. In fact, he was the first president to fly in an airplane across the ocean. He was the first sitting president to travel to 3 different continents: South America, Asia, and Africa. Roosevelt was the first president to be named.
Yeah, so he obviously also traveled to Europe, but I think he's just saying he was the first one to go to those particular continents. You know, Asia, for example, was Tehran Conference.
Times Person of the Year. And finally, FDR was the first to establish a presidential library. Harry Truman, the first president to go bowling at the White House, of course. Also, the first to have a nationally televised inauguration.
Oh, wow. Didn't know
Dwight
that.
Eisenhower, the first president to be in office when the country had 50 states. Eisenhower was also the first president to play football in college. Yeah, incredibly, there were 4 other presidents who played college football.
Yeah, look at that picture of Nixon. That's crazy. Yeah, so Ike was apparently so hardcore when he played football that he regularly injured other players because he was just that intense when he played.
Eisenhower was the first president to ride in a jet and a helicopter. He was the first to hold a televised news conference. And finally, Eisenhower was the first president to appear on color television.
That's cool. And, just looking at this picture, just because I've had the privilege, many of you have seen the interview I did with Susan Eisenhower in Gettysburg, and I'll get to see her again here in April. Wonderful lady. She's super smart, really got a great head on her shoulders, very kind, very well-spoken, and is a great representative of the Eisenhower family. And man, does she look like her grandfather.
John F. Kennedy, the first president to be Roman Catholic. He was the first president to meet a championship team at the White House. That was the Boston Celtics in 1963. Kennedy was the first president to use the Situation Room, which is actually a 5,000 square foot complex on the ground floor of the West Wing of the White House and used ever since to deal with any major crisis that pops up. Lyndon Johnson. LBJ was the first president to visit Australia. He was also the first to use a presidential call button, a way to call aides quickly to the Oval Office.
That was his wife standing there. She wasn't one of his aides, but yeah. That's
Richard Nixon, the first president to visit all 50 states.
Really?
Nixon was also the first to attend an NFL game while in office.
And the first to resign. I mean, he's not saying all the first, obviously, but First and only president to resign from office.
Ford. Here's a couple of weird ones that probably don't automatically come to mind. Ford was the first president to testify in a criminal trial. He was also the first president to release a full medical report to the public. Jimmy Carter. The first president born in a hospital. Believe
Really?
it or not.
That's
he was
crazy.
also the first president to install computers in the White House. Carter was the first president to host the freaking Pope. That was Pope John Paul II
Yeah.
in 1979. Ronald Reagan. I know we're used to them now, but our first truly old man president. Reagan was the first president to first get elected over the age of 70. He was the
So he turned, yeah, he's right. I mean, William Henry Harrison was right around that same age.
first to attend the Olympics and a NASCAR race, and he was the first president to temporarily give up his powers as president under the 25th Amendment. On July 13th, 1985, Reagan let his vice president, George H.W. Bush, fill in for him while he had colon cancer surgery. George H.W. Bush, the first president to pardon a turkey, sparking this weird tradition right before Thanksgiving that has happened ever since. And that's all I got for Bush. Just the turkey thing. Bill Clinton, the first president to use the internet and send an email while in office. He was also the first president to stream his inauguration over the internet. Clinton was also the first to attend an NHL hockey game while in office. And he was the first boomer president. And the boomers have been in power ever since.
I mean, yeah, we've had 3 presidents who were born in 1946, so right at the end of World War II. Actually, all born the same summer. It was Clinton, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump, all born like June, July, August of 1946.
George W. Bush, the first president to ever have a State of the Union live broadcast on the internet. And he was the first president to attack another country in the so-called War on Terror. Barack Obama, the first African-American president. More specifically, he was the first president to be multi-ethnic, with his father being from Kenya and his mom being from Kansas.
Right, yeah, people often forget that. He was half white. He was mixed race. Doesn't take anything away from being the first African-American president, just important to point that out.
Obama was also the first president born outside the 48 contiguous states.
Born in Hawaii.
He was the first sitting president to travel north of the Arctic Circle, and the first to visit a federal prison, crazily enough. He was the first sitting president to attend an NBA game and appear on a podcast.
I give him a lot of credit for the prison visit thing, because a lot of people might look at the optics of that and think it was, but honestly, especially as a Christian, Jesus gave an admonition to, where he talked about, I was in prison and you visited me, talking about how seeing people in those situations, we should have compassion for them. And as somebody who's had close family members in prison and visited them myself, let's just not lump everybody in prison as being these awful people. A lot of people just make really bad choices and are redeemable and should be seen as such and seen as human beings with dignity and worth. There's also a lot of really awful people in prison, so that's fair.
Donald Trump. I mean, there's a lot of...
He chose like the most orange picture of Trump you could find.
Gay game
Let's
and
go
appear
back.
on a podcast. Donald Trump. I mean, there's a lot of firsts with this dude, too. But since he's such a unique president, maybe some of these will be onlys? Trump is the first president to launch his own cryptocurrency, the first to own a social media platform, the first to be banned from a social media platform, the first billionaire president, the first to attend a UFC competition while in office.
To be fair, that's true about billionaire, but there have been other presidents that, when adjusted for inflation, would probably have been billionaires.
The first to have children from 3 different wives, the first to pardon a corporation, and the first to have a personal YouTube channel reach 1 million subscribers.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah, he may be the only president to do all that. Joe Biden, The first to join a picket line while in office. He was the first to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The first to become a great-grandfather while in office. And yeah, I should note that Biden had the first female vice president in American history, Kamala Harris. Well, that's it.
All right, that was cool, and I like that he did some unique ones instead of just doing the ones we would expect him to do with some of those. So I learned some things I didn't know. I hope you did as well. Like I said, check out his channel through the link in the description, or check out all of my other reactions to Mr. Beat videos over time in the playlist pinned down below. Thanks for watching.